All right, you guys, we covered, excuse me, pages 105 through 129 tonight, right, Jamie?
Mhm.
All right, just making sure that's time to connect with you today on that topic. Anyways, all right, so you guys, I loved where he was talking just best behaviors on being a level 2 leader and how to get people's permission. So he talked about that a little bit too, like it's about being able to influence someone. How do you get that? And in order to create leaders, that's probably the number one question we get asked on Gold and even Ruby coaching is how do I create leaders? And I would say that this is it right here. This, you get permission to speak into their life and to be someone that they want to follow. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here. But the very first step is self-awareness. He said, very few people are self-aware. But in order to become self-aware, you need to learn what your weaknesses are and your strengths. So you need to know who you are. Where do you struggle? I struggle with saying hello to new people, and I understand that about myself. So I have to be intentional to not stay in my bubble when I am out like I was tonight and go and say hi to, even if it's just one person. Understanding how you think, how you act, how you feel in any situation. Um, when I met my husband, I gave him a heads up, like, hey, here's some of my weaknesses. Are you willing to put up with these certain things within me? Because I know myself and I become very self-aware over the years, and I can tell when something's going to get me heated. For example, if you're messaging someone and maybe they are arguing with you about the products or the business, or they have an objection, is that going to irritate you? If it is, know yourself enough to know to not respond. Close the laptop, step away from your phone until you can come back. And it's interesting the perspective that you can come back to when you're dealing with team conflict or something that's frustrating to you. Just seeing it through different eyes and a different perspective if you can take the time to come back to it. It was interesting that he said, I know people who've never gotten along with themselves a single day in their lives. I thought that was interesting, and I can kind of relate sometimes. And I kind of had to laugh about that. But he talked about not believing in themselves, creating problems, and then pretending they're someone else's fault. I feel like this is something that a lot of people can do in their life too. I underlined pretty much this whole book, so it's hard to find exactly what to talk about. But I love this right here, and I'll let Jamie go ahead and share some things on just becoming self-aware. But the very bottom of page 106, he who has so little knowledge of human nature as to seek happiness by changing anything but his own disposition will waste his life in fruitless effort and multiply the grief which he proposes to remove. That's trying to fix every other problem without fixing ourselves first. And that was something at the beginning of my business. Sonia Dudley said, if you work more on yourself than you do on your business is going to grow. Because I spent 2 years spending 8 hours a day going through all the action. I was doing all of the work, all of the messages, all of the reach outs, all of the follow-ups. I was on all of the calls, but I had to stop and pause and work on myself and knowing who I was. And she was right. John Maxwell was right. Then my business did start to grow after I worked on myself. It was kind of amazing. All right, Jamie, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean this section was really important, I think, because oftentimes I think we can go into like, okay, focusing on how do we help other people? How do we get them to grow? How do we get them to follow? How do we get them to, well, all these things, and we don't ever first think to look at ourselves. So this is extremely important. I think the fact I wrote down, at the bottom of just that first 105 there, he said you have to understand the way you think, feel, and act in every kind of situation. And I wrote down, why is this important? So why do you guys think that is important? Because it's extremely important, because if we are not aware of just the things that Phallin was giving for examples, you know, of tendencies or of shortcomings or how we feel on things, then it's gonna create bigger conflicts, or you're not gonna be able to help someone as good as you could potentially help someone, or you're not gonna be able to connect as well with people. So if we are not aware, we're going to be getting in our own way with that. So sometimes that whole 24-hour rule, if you feel like you're anxious about something or something is bothering you, or you're not seeing eye to eye with someone, be it in life or in this business, they talk, it's funny, they talk about that with coaching as well. My husband's a coach for different sports with our kids, and they talk about that with coaching too. There's a 24-hour rule between parents and coaches or kids, because if you're heated right after a game, everyone's, you know, heightened with that. So same thing when we're working with people, there's just bound to be things as you develop leaders, as you grow as a leader, there's going to be things where you don't see eye to eye. And sometimes that 24-hour rule is extremely important. And that's part of being self-aware and knowing that you need to take a step back and look objectively at something and not maybe based on feelings. And then I thought too, you know, getting along with yourself. I think if there's a lot of things that you don't like about yourself, and I think we can all be our own worst critics, myself included. For me, like I can easily identify that. I know that that's the thing. But if it's so blatant and over encompassing in terms of your thoughts and how you truly feel about yourself, if that's all that you feel about yourself, then I think that's really going to affect how you connect with other people. It's going to affect how you come across to other people. If you don't find anything that you like about yourself, how is that going to portray to others, and how are other people going to find things? So I think we have to be careful, like he said, like work on the things that you can change and accept the things that are, you know, that you can't. And he moves into developing people-oriented style there in terms of not relying on rules to lead people. So I'll kind of step into this part here to move us forward a little bit from this. That is very important, I think hard to grasp sometimes, because we want systems for everything. We want scripts for everything. We want to know, okay, just how do I do this? Or tell me exactly what to say. And in some ways in this business, it's so very helpful. And systems are very important. They're really good for duplication. They're good for direction, but not everything can be a system. And when it comes to leadership, that's what's the hardest thing to kind of put in an exact system, because it's so relational. You have to be able to connect, and it can't be a scripted thing. So he gets into this in terms of, you know, connecting with people and developing those relationships. And he goes into that, I think further a little bit there. Sorry, that didn't even make sense, that sentence. Even further into the next couple of pages. And as much as we can do, I think what has helped me a lot with that is getting elbow to elbow with other leaders and being in the room with other leaders and seeing how they connect, and having that relationship with other leaders with myself and seeing how they connect with me and relate to me and work through things, because it's not an exact science or it's not an exact script, but it's learning how to be relational with people and to work through things. So being in the room with people, I think that is part of an important thing as you grow in anything.
Yeah, I love that right there. Because when I started, we didn't have systems. It wasn't even a word that we used, and it was all about relationships. And we had constant momentum, and we were growing. And this was well past diamonds before people started talking about systems. And I definitely see the value in systems. At first, I was like, we don't need any of this, because we grew without this. And I think it's really helpful, especially with retention. But you cannot create a system that replaces relationships, and excitement and enthusiasm all day, every day is going to win. And we just talked about this on coaching too. You must think in less of in terms of systems and more of people's emotions. Think more in terms of human capacity and less in terms of regulations. And this applies to parenting. This applies to relationships with our spouses and every human, because what works in a relationship with Jamie might not work in a relationship with Courtney or Cody or any of my other level ones. I have to, and we all do have to know who we're talking to and be able to focus on that. And that comes into play when you're coaching, or, you're understanding what to say to someone when they have a bad day, stuff like that. I think that's just really important. And how do you know, like, what to say or what to do? And he says to practice the golden rule. That's how you make sure you're not blurring the lines between motivating or manipulating people, trying to get really, because if you get good with people, it can turn into that. Like, you can learn how to get people what to do, but what is the difference between motivating them? And to motivate someone, that's why we always say, like, you have to care more about that person and what their goals are, because your goals don't matter, and people know that, and people sense that, and whatever their goals are, that's what you want to help them with. What else here? Skipping those 2 pages. I didn't have a ton underlined. Do you have anything to add with that, Jamie, or should I just keep moving forward?
Well, just really quick on the end of that golden rule, I think it's important because it's come up. I think there can be, when you're working with people and you are leading and you're trying to influence people, he brings up kind of that elephant in the room of people thinking like, I said that part or later, maybe I'm jumping the gun, but he brings up at some point the part of being manipulative with that. I think I'm kind of skipping, but he mentions it
Oh,
here.
you're not. You're right there.
Okay, cool. And it's and that is a concern, I suppose, if you're worried about, hey, how much am I doing this and doing it to like influence in a way that's manipulative. And he gives like the check and balance there is when you're doing the golden rule, when you have respect from people, when it's, I mean, and I'll add in, when you make it about them and not yourself, you can gut check yourself there, if you're doing it to better help someone else and add value to them, then you can be certain, this kind of connects with later too, but you can be certain that you are doing it from a good place. You're doing it as a leader. So I think, and that's where it made me think of it, because he said people go from feeling like a stake to feeling like a stakeholder, right? And then, yeah, did you want to keep going? I didn't want to cut you off there, Phil.
No, you're fine. That was good, because I wanted to start talking about the difficult conversations that you have to have. You're required to have difficult conversations as a leader. And I feel like they're easier conversations than some of the difficult conversations we are so blessed to get to have with our children or teenagers. So it's good. If you can talk to your kids, you can talk to team members, and doing everything in love is so true. He says that, and I can't find it which page it was on, so I might be getting it out of order, but he was talking about, if you don't have conversations with people, they're not going to rise above to the next level of leadership. But if you do have the hard conversation, they might decide to leave. They might decide to not listen, and they might decide to stay, but only then can they rise to the next level of leadership. Only then can they grow. And I think that's so important, because sometimes the hard conversations can be scary, but I think if you come at it out of a place of love, and if the person you're talking to is coachable. That's why it's so important to me for someone to be coachable, because I don't like to waste my breath, and it's a lot of energy poured into developing people for them to just like, I don't want to listen. And I'm not talking about like doing something a little bit different, but like those type of people that are like, yeah, I'm just flat out not going to listen to anything that you're saying. So he gives kind of an example of questions that you need to ask yourself when you're leading them through difficult conversations. I love where he talked about leaders have to make the best decision for the largest group, not just one person. This is on page 115. And getting results always matters. And good leaders never lose track of that in the midst of feelings and emotions. And I don't want to remind her again about three-way calls, but I know it's really important. Or especially convention or events. Like, I don't want to talk about that again. I already told her she should go. learn how to say it in a different way. Don't just avoid it because it seems difficult if it's something really important. Um, so he gives on page 116 just kind of like bullet points, and we don't have to talk through all of this, but do it quickly. Shovel the pile while it's small was the one that stood out the most to me, as well as doing it calmly, never in anger. If you're feeling your pulse rise and your heart beating and you just gotta say something, you have leaders on your team. I promise that is not the time to say something to them. Jamie has witnessed it, probably with all of the Reds in the mix of here. I know we've Reds, including myself, have had moments, but yeah, I just thought I thought that was a good reminder right there.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that he did here, and if you do not feel confident about the importance of this yet, I encourage you to reread this little section from like 111 to 115 or 116 there. But he makes it extremely clear that it is not just because there's so many facets to this, but it's important that like this is necessary to do for people's growth. So if you are leading other people, it's not just something that is like, oh, this is a hard conversation, I want to avoid it. If you want to help them grow, it's a part of leading. It's 100% necessary, and you're not going to help them if you don't. So if you are avoiding this is a question I want you guys to ask yourself. If you tend to avoid, or you have avoided conversations, or you kind of tend to still do that, and it's something that is necessary potentially for someone's growth, or it could be something that's holding someone back and you haven't really dug into it with someone, then I encourage you to ask yourself why you're avoiding this and maybe reread this section, because it's vital for helping them move forward in their business. Otherwise, they are going to stay the same or go backwards. And that's your job as a leader to help them, right? He makes it very clear to show the difference between caring and candor. And you have to have that balance. And if you don't have that balance, it could very much go in the wrong way. So if you go in thinking, okay, yeah, I'm a really strong leader, and I don't mind shooting it straight, and I can be very blunt, and I'm just gonna, tell it how it is. Well, if you don't mix that with the caring, it could go very much in the wrong direction. You could push people away. You could rub people the wrong way because you could seem like it's coming from a bad place, right? So you have to have that connection. And a lot of times it's by, saying something, and he gives that example, and he did the exact same thing in his example. What John Maxwell did is, so you highlight what's good. What is that person doing well? What is something that you appreciate about that person? Genuinely compliment or highlight what is going good, and then maybe bring in, okay, here is something that could also be worked in, or here's something I see, or if I saw something that was holding you back. So so make sure you mix that together genuinely. And again, he asked those questions later that Phallin highlighted, because if you don't have that relationship built, then you can't really bring that, what he calls it is candor, to the table if you haven't done the work of building the relationship, right? So one thing I wanted to point out, he mentions this proverb that says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. And that makes me think of how being a cheerleader in this business, if you're only a cheerleader in this business, if you're only that person who's going to encourage, and that is all you do, and you can't ever sit down and help someone grow by looking at areas that they can grow in and by helping work through hard things, if you're only going to be that cheerleader, then is that being deceitful? Is that not being helpful at the end of the day? Right? You have to be the cheerleader, but you also have to be a leader. And that comes with having the conversations, right? So I thought that was pretty bold to look at it in that way. And then, of course, he wraps it up in that section with making sure that you yourself have to be mature enough to not be defensive yourself. It goes back to that self-awareness when other people bring things to you, right? It has to be a two-way street of being able to receive criticism or receive hard conversations and not jump with being defensive, and being willing to learn from it ourselves.
Yeah, he talks as we move into the next section here on page 118 about how do you get people to do something willingly, excellently, and consistently, and that's by influencing them. We have lots of books on influence, and I think it's a good topic to talk on. He doesn't say too much about that right there. But isn't one of his books called like Becoming a Person of Influence? I think that's one of his, and I think we've done it. Or
Yeah.
one of the other books really talked about that heavily too, and it was super good. I want to talk a little bit about the law of magnetism, who you are and who you attract. I think that, like you said, we see leaders often, they attract who they are, not who they want. And that's a good check that I've had all my leaders do. And I've done, like, look at your leaders and what have you attracted? Are there certain traits? Are they things that you want? And then also on the flip side, who do you want to attract? And then put that, not become that person, but put that part of you out there. If you want to attract someone who's consistent, who's hardworking, who's disciplined, post about those things. If you want to attract somebody who is around people and having fun, if you go out and do those things, those are going to be the kind of people that want to come to you. If you only post on trips, you're going to find a lot of people who want to do the trips. And it's really interesting how all of that works. So if people who start flocking to you are relational, non-territorial, teachable, and productive, and that it's probably a positive statement about your leadership. But if they are closed-minded, unmotivated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then maybe they're saying something that you need to change in yourself. And honestly, what I've found, especially since the majority of our marketing is done through social media, it's not that it's necessarily something you have to change about yourself. It's something that you need to change in your posting. Like, look through your social media, do a personal social media evaluation. Like, what am I putting out there as the kind of person that I am? Because sometimes we can be fake on social media, and sometimes we can show our real self, and it might not be our best self. That tends to be the side where I come in. Like, how honest is too honest? Should I really say that every day this week has sucked? You don't want to attract that kind of person that's always negative and has that over them. And then, yeah, Jamie, you want to go ahead? I might have one or two things to say before we wrap up.
I was just gonna shift over to that next part is moving up to level 3, right? So that's what we're gonna look at moving forward. And really that ultimately comes down to, you have this influence, you have, the permission here, but then what are you gonna do with it, right? It only goes so far if you're not going anywhere, if you're not helping anyone achieve anything, then that's where we get capped at that leadership level. So moving up to level 3 is helping people actually accomplish something and move forward. So it's connecting, he says, their potential to their performance, right? So being able, but all of this has been groundwork to move up to that, because we can't help someone really achieve things if we don't have that influence, if we haven't built those connections and those relationships. This is where he mentions the tension too. And I can't remember if you kind of touched on this, Phallin, a little bit too. It kind of connects back to what Phallin said earlier, but when we build those relationships, there's always going to be risks, right? So when we have those conversations, like Phallin said, when we have things happen, we do risk things and risk changes, but you need to be able to have and do the things as a leader to help people move forward. I think the most important thing that he mentions there is it'll force you to make a choice between either you shrinking your vision or stretching the people to reach it. And if ever you are in a position as a leader and you have people under you and they are pulling back, or they're uncomfortable, or they don't want to step forward in action, or they, are acting in a way that's not moving you forward in your vision, it is not the indication for you to back down to them and to make them comfortable and to just stay where they're at. Your job as the leader, you're gonna have a choice then. You can go back to where they are at and stay to make them comfortable, or you can, and it's a risk either way, right? But you can risk stepping forward with your vision, encouraging and stretching them, helping them see, having some of those hard conversations, helping them see the benefit of growth and how they can step forward out of their comfort zone or do something to move forward. And that's a little bit of the hard thing as a leader, is knowing that you have to keep moving forward and keep finding and developing people who are going to go where you want to go, right? Who you can lead forward to help hit goals. So he really hits kind of a deep thing with that we've certainly seen, I know, Phallin and I, in our years of doing this with Plexus. So
Yeah. All right, guys, we're going to open for questions. And I just want to add real quick to encourage you to go through the guide to growing through level 2. It's on the last 4 pages. So many good questions to ask yourself as you're thinking about your leaders and your future leaders that you want to attract, the people on your team, the people using the products. Just think about all of that as you read through those pages right there. All right, we can take some questions now.
I actually have a question. It's kind of goes back to like what you were talking about with like when you're leading people and they seem like super excited and they seem to be really on board with what you're talking about and you feel like everybody's on the same page and everybody's super excited. And like what do you do when like on a Tuesday, that's where everybody's excited and everybody seems to be on the same page. And then on Wednesday, when you get up, that same person that like looked you right in the eyeballs and was like ready to go with, whatever plan you were getting ready to go with says, "Oh, I watched this podcast this morning that completely contradicts everything you said. And I'm going to go left instead of this way with you." And you're just like, okay. I've had somebody that I worked with that kind of did that to me on more than one occasion, and I'm just not exactly sure how to deal with that personality.
What did you do to deal with it that time that it happened?
Well, I tried talking with her, at which she was dodge, dodge, dodge. But when I did talk to her about it, um, I spent a lot of time listening, like, tell me more. Tell me about, this thing that you're interested in. And um she did. And I was like, well, this is why we really feel like this would be the better direction to go. Um, you know, we're teaching you it this way because all of these people ahead of us have done it this way and they've been very, very successful. And you've expressed many times, your respect for these people ahead of us, and this is what they're teaching us to do. What do you say to that? And then it's like a ghost town, like crickets everywhere with no response. So it's really hard to gauge, how effective that was, when you're questioning that and asking them to tell you more and like tell you why did you veer that direction when we were on this path, um when they completely shut down and then say, oh, this is just too overwhelming, I can't have that conversation. So it was very difficult, but I'm trying to figure out how I could have handled that differently.
So here, Justina, you're on the right track. Here is what I was going to say before she said it, before I did.
Oh, sorry, I don't see the things popping up.
It's okay. So I'm going to talk about it. So instead of, this is easier for a very red personality or like a type A. instead of suggesting or being understanding, matter of factly telling why it's a bad idea and then not worrying about the outcome.
Okay.
Let the pieces fall where it may. So, for example, if you say, you need to, someone's like, yeah, I'm not going to do three-way calls. I watched a podcast and they said that it's not important. Then I would say, well, I can tell you right now that it's really, really important for getting business builders. The teams that duplicate this have a really high silver rate compared to the teams that do not. And that way, when, and this is going to sound red, I don't know have any other way to say it, but when they fall flat on their face, they can come back and say, oh, she was right. So that is a stance to always take. Say it like it is, like, yeah, that's a really bad idea. I absolutely wouldn't do it that way. And then give them the facts, give them the evidence. You can tag them in another video and then leave it. Just leave that with them so that when they aren't creating silvers or so that it doesn't work out for them, which I would love for anybody's ideas to work out for them, but we just know from experience that there's certain ways to do things just like any other job.
Yeah.
Then they will come back to you and that will build trust and rapport and influence. I had to do this so many times. Like I had people who were golds and they didn't want to listen to me, didn't want to listen to me. And I'm like, all right, well, this is the way it is. And I kept going. And then when I hit Ruby and they were still gold, they're like, all right, tell me what you're doing. And then they were willing to listen to everything that I had to say. Does that make sense?
Sure, it does. And honestly, my knee-jerk reaction, when we read that book about the color personalities, I am like a chameleon. I'm underlying, I am very much a red, but I was taught my whole life to walk on eggshells around people. So I adopted more of a yellow personality to try to tone down my, I guess would be more abrasive edges. And I feel like sometimes I need to just like, all right, quit knee jerking and just do it. Just say it. And like you said, just let the chips fall and quit trying to make everybody feel really comfortable and hold their hand.
Yeah. So as a really strong red natural leader, take charge personality, I haven't toned it down, but I learn how to hear what they're saying and be understanding while still firmly saying what
Like
I
this
need
is
to
my
say.
boundary.
Yeah. So don't do it to make them like I don't tone it down to make them comfortable. I tone it down to make sure they understand that I care about them and their business.
Right.
That's the different perspective with that.
Yeah. Mine was more just like you need to be very quiet and don't speak up, don't rock the boat, don't anything. So it was a weird upbringing. So
Yeah,
it's kind
that's
of like
okay.
jerked out
So-
of me to be like a boundary holder. So
And we've all been there. I think what I like to do is look at like, all right, look at people on stage at convention. Who do I want to listen to? And it's usually someone with a strong, confident posture of, you need to be doing this, not
yep.
suggestions or maybes. Very
Mhm.
confident is who we like to follow.
Okay. Yep.
And
I've
you can
got
still stay in a way of being like upfront, like Phallin said, versus like
yeah.
I think the way that she changes and in terms of I've given this example before, but in terms of who she's even speaking to with that red personality, like if she were to come up to me and say, hey, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. You're not gonna do that. Like you're so dumb. Like I'd be like, okay. But
Well, and that's why I really liked that checklist that was in there too. Like, check yourself before you're going to have these conversations. And like if you can answer yes to these, then you're going to this conversation with the right state of mind. So, if you know that you're going in with the right state of mind, then, just make sure you know your audience, like what you just said, Jamie, and then, speak to the correct audience. But like what Fal said, hold your boundary and don't be like asking permission to tell them what you really think they'd need to be doing. That's what I hear from what you've said.
Yep.
So I like that. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
good question. It's not always easy. Any other questions?
Any ideas on how to get people, I hesitate to use the word get, maybe teach people on lower levels that really aren't having the opportunity to lead yet because they don't have followers or workers under them yet? How do you suggest to somebody to start being a leader when there's no followers? I mean, I know we've talked about, making a live in the team page and videos, but is there anything else that you can think of that people that want to be leaders that aren't yet, that they can start implementing?
I'd say they have to lead themselves first is the easiest thing to like wrap your brain around. So what are the things they should be doing? And it doesn't have to be overcomplicated, right? Like, so what are the things they need to be doing to be leading themselves first so that they are, when they bring people in, they are able to duplicate that. So, I mean, that comes down to the basics, like how you work your business and what your commitments are and your consistency with that, and showing up even when it's hard or it's inconvenient. The things like you mentioned that, adding value in the comments, different things like that, of course, being visible. But I think the building that work ethic and consistency and how you lead yourself and how you show up is the biggest thing in terms of, I guess, leadership, until you have the people that you're following. I mean, other than learning how to bring in business builders and recruiting and stuff like that, diving into that a little bit more specific, using that as a skill set to grow in, to be able to develop business builders. Phallin.
What do you have them doing so far, and how long have they been in the business, Janelle?
So I have been, and probably not consistent with this, but once in a while we'll do challenges. So in the past, I've made them make a YouTube channel. So once in a while I have them just create a video and put it in there. It can be private, it doesn't have to be public. I've done things like that. I've done, it kind of depends what we're doing as a team. If we're doing team huddles, and sometimes I'll ask people to, talk a little bit. It's a little bit challenging to come up with some things for some people. I guess it's kind of individual based too, right? Because everybody's got different things that they need to work on. Yeah, probably not enough.
So I guess aside from the practical things, I think it's good to have a guide, and that would be push them a little bit beyond their comfort zone. Wherever they're at and wherever they're comfortable, get them doing a little bit more. If they are freely welcoming people on the team page or freely commenting and talking on book club and they're unmuting, like that's a must. Like if they want to be a leader, you need to be unmuting, talking, adding value. They need to be, I would not tell them they can make their YouTube video private. It needs to be public. They literally need to jump off the cliff in with everybody watching them. That's going to create boldness and that's going to create confidence. If they're going to be scared about that, imagine how they are in their private messages. So I wouldn't tell them that it can be private. I'm just like, you're going to put it out there to the world. Same with a dream board. Have them make that like a screensaver and put it on their stories. We would post it on our walls. Like we literally took pictures and put it on our wall. Like, this is where we're going. This is where we're headed. This is what we're doing. I think anything, and you can be a behind the scenes type of leader. You don't have to be loud and bold and in the front, but if you're trying to create leaders and people want leadership, they need to be out in the front. They need to be bold. They need to be public. They need to be where people can see them. And it's just really creating influence. They can read some books. The John Maxwell one on influence, I think would be really good for somebody who wants to be a leader. The leader is basically just someone who gets people to follow. And sometimes people like, I don't know why these people are following me. And I'm like, you're a leader. Like my I have a couple new people and I'm just like, you are a leader. Did you just see what you just did? Like you literally just said something and that person is doing everything that you said to do and you don't even know that you're a leader. So it's influence. If they can gain influence, they can get their new business builders and anybody to follow them. And we're basically not really influencers, but little mini influencers as we share on social media. So they have a huge platform if they want to be a leader right there on their social media, learning that, watching some trainings on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good question.
I will pose another question off that just because it's come up before. So Phallin, what would you say then with people who maybe don't feel like they need to be in, say, an IPA chat or get on book club or calls yet because they don't have a team doing these things yet either. And so they don't see the value in that yet. So speak on that.
Couple answers with that. For one, if you want to be a leader, first you have to be a follower and you have to be participating and doing all the things that you want your team to do. I tell my kids this all the time. You just need to do it. You just need to do it because it creates habits. So that's one thing right there is just creating the habits. You don't, a real leader isn't going to just jump in because they have someone following them. That's actually a follower. You're a follower of your downline. If you're not doing the things before you have people behind you and underneath you and in your downline, if you're not already doing those things, you're not really a leader. And then when the going gets tough, it's going to be even more tough for you to continue going. When I was Ruby, I remember thinking about my team and I was like, oh my gosh, I got some really great people and they're doing all the things. I need to be doing quadruple what I expect of them. And I was like reading like crazy. And I'm like, I got to lead these people. And leading is you're in the front. You're already doing it. You've already been there for a couple of years doing the things without anybody following you. So to somebody who's waiting, I hope none of you are, but someone who's waiting on your downline to show up for book club or to an IPA chat, or when I have a worker, I'll do that. You are not a leader. You are a follower. So I would be working on your leadership, and that's leading yourself again.
Yep, that's really good. Any other questions, you guys?
So just really fast, because I think this will be an easy answer, but what resources would you guys suggest for new builders to learn about the importance of leading themselves well? Like, do you guys have like something specific that you would use to teach that to someone?
The importance of leading themselves well. Is that what she said, Jamie?
Yeah, you said like resources, right?
Yeah, so like I've had those conversations about like the importance of showing up and like doing the things and etc. But there's a few smaller things that actually are like bigger things that like affect like duplication, and stuff like that. And so I'm like listening to you guys talk about that importance of leading yourself well, even when they don't like have their own builders yet. So I was just wondering like what resources might you guys suggest for very new people who I kind of think might be struggling in that kind of maybe with a little bit of that mindset. Now that you said it, I kind of was like, oh, I wonder if that's it. So
Honestly, you know what my quick answer is? I'm watching this with my 17-year-old right now. I was like, here's John Maxwell CDs. Let's listen to it. Like we bought all the teenagers CD players, so they're listening to CDs and they are listening to music and he wasn't doing that. I was like, you can put an audiobook on and then you could do that. So he's out driving on the tractor, listening to audiobooks. And I have noticed a difference in him on his own. I don't have to say anything. He is learning and processing through. Personal growth is by far the best thing that you can get your new people doing and started on right away, because we don't have the time to do this for everybody. I mean, they can pick up John Maxwell and learn all of these things. And if they have that continuous growing mindset, like, yeah, we're not in high school anymore, but always learning, always growing. Even my husband, he actually just told me he wanted to buy me to buy him like some book. And I was like, oh my gosh, he just asked for a book on his own. That is great. He'll read a couple pages and like want to talk about it. And like it changes people. So if they want to learn how to be leaders or you want to encourage them for resources, I would say podcasts are hard for me because the information can be all over the place and it can be really distracting. Like I like them, but for new people, I would give them a very specific Audible or whatever, a book, something. And I think that is the best way for them to learn how to be leaders. For someone who's very new, just start personal growth. Start with John Maxwell's 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth.
Yeah. I was gonna say 25-year irrefutable laws too, whichever. That's kind of like the go-to that we say a lot too, but definitely a book for sure. And we have that one saved now, don't we? As from a book study that we've done. I thought we've saved that one in terms of even they could follow along with it. So probably have time for one more question if someone has one. You guys are a little quieter tonight. Sometimes y'all are jumping at the gun.
I have a question if nobody else is going to ask one. So what would you guys say to a leader who, or somebody on your team, like they want to grow in their leadership, they're trying to grow personally and all these things, and they're in that place where they're waiting, like what Phallin said, they're not actually leaders, they're followers that want to be leaders and leadership and want to be in leadership positions. What would be, other than the personal growth, other than the just doing the work, what is like one step you would give somebody who doesn't really believe they're that leader, wants to be that leader, is in that follower mindset? What is one thing you would give them to start practicing? Like, would it be videos? Is there anything practical you would give them other than just read books?
Yeah, I would start adding value and making videos, showing your face on your stories, talking, teaching something if you can teach something. So that everything they're reading in personal growth, it's going to take it onto another level of ownership once they can teach it to somebody. So hands down, making videos is where I would definitely start. If they don't have people under them yet, or if they just have a few in-person trainings, like, you don't need me to do it for you. Here you go. Here's an outline. I like to give outlines to people. Like, here's some things that you want to cover. Now go and do it. Yeah, that's where I would start.
You could do an event with that person and like plan it together, like plan something together, even if it's a training, do something with them and talk together about, okay, how would you do this? Or when do you like, what do you want to part do you want to play or whatever, like figure it out and coordinate it together so they have ownership in facilitating that. And then they can, from there, if they're, or maybe they're already leading their own events, but from there could lead their own, right? So anything that you can do and bring them along in terms of the decision making and doing something with them, especially before they have their own leaders to do that with their own people, you should be doing that with your people. And then when they have workers, they're going to coordinate and collaborate with their people. So think of the ways you can link arms with someone and bring them along and not just telling them what to do, but like bringing them along with the decision making of an extra training call that you guys want to do together or an event or, something like that.
Yes, Jamie, that is so huge. I am so glad you said that because that is how you train leaders, is they're a part of your leadership circle with you. And I have asked my leaders, like, how did you know how to do that? And they're like, I just watched you and I just went and did with my people everything that you were doing with us. So when they don't have people under them, they're participating with whatever you have going on, whatever the upline has going on, that is it. You're doing events together, you're leading calls together, you're making trainings together. Jamie and I, we would do tons of trainings together, like just get together like and like this and record a training, go live together. Oh, the challenge of trying to go live together in the team page. And we would do that together. I wasn't necessarily trying to make her into a leader. We were just doing it because we were leading together. So that's what I would do with your people. And then when they have their own people, eventually, probably a while from now, then they will branch off and they will do those things with their people. And you'll just sit back and watch them run their business. And it's kind of cool.
Well, good questions, you guys. Phallin, do we want to wrap it up? We got 3 minutes.
Well, I don't have anything else to say that I haven't already said, I do not think. He talks in this book about how before you go to production, which there are definitely personalities who struggle with the relationships and they're really big on production. As a matter of fact, that is a problem, according to John Maxwell. That is a problem that some people are really big on production. And he says, if you want to keep moving up the ladder, to do yourself a favor and get back to relationships before you go full speed ahead, rock star recruiting and doing all these things that we know we need to do, but you want to have that relationship and that solid foundation first. People don't usually leave where there's solid relationships and good culture. So really make sure you have this chapter down and figured out. You got a couple weeks to work through these things. I encourage you to like make a list. Like, here's this leader, here's this leader, here's this leader, or here's what I'm going to do with future leaders, or here's some future leaders I want on my team, stuff like that. And then we will be meeting, Jamie and I, we'll be in Hawaii, but then we'll be back on the 30th. And we will be meeting then, going over the next section.
And then after that, we're going to jump right back into our normal schedule. So they'll actually be back-to-back calls, right? So just keep that in mind as if you work ahead or, you know, you'll have 1 week for the next chunk after that. So just a heads up.
Yep. And then back to the first and third Mondays. All right, you guys, we will see you later. Thank you. Thanks for all your questions too.
Bye guys. Have a good night.